All right, let's talk about something that pretty much dictates every single purchase you make, whether you even think about it or not. We're going to do a deep dive into the economics of want. In other words, demand.
So, what makes you decide to buy something? No, really, think about it for a second. That coffee you grabbed this morning, the phone you're probably watching this on, what was that little switch that flipped in your brain that made you say, "Yep, I'm buying it"? You might think it's just a simple choice, but trust me, there's a whole economic engine humming away right under the surface.
See, in the world of economics, demand is a bit more specific than just wanting stuff. It's about the amount of something that you're both willing to buy, and this is the key part, able to buy at a certain price. So, yeah, I might want a private jet, but unless I've got the cash for it, I don't actually have what an economist would call demand for one.
So let's break that down into what's called effective demand. For your want to become demand, it's got to pass a three-point check. First, you've got to desire it. Obvious, right? Second, you need the money for it, the ability to pay. And third, you have to actually be willing to part with that money. You need all three. If one's missing, it's not real demand. And all of this leads us to one of the most fundamental ideas in all of economics, the law of demand. Honestly, it's something you already know instinctively. If your favorite coffee shop has a 2-for-1 deal, what happens? You probably buy more coffee. But if they suddenly double the price, you're probably buying less or none at all. It's a super simple inverse relationship. Price goes up, demand goes down. Price goes down, demand goes up. Okay, so we can actually see this in action with numbers. What you're looking at here is called a demand schedule. It takes that general law and makes it concrete. Just look at the coffee example. When a cup costs 6 rupees, nobody's interested. 0 cups demanded. But look what happens when the price drops all the way to 1 rupee. Boom, people are demanding 50 cups a week. That's the law of demand right there on the page. Now, what if we take those numbers from the table and, plot them on a graph? Well, when we do that, we get what is probably the most famous visual in all of economics, the demand curve. You've got price going up the side, quantity along the bottom, and you get this classic downward sloping line. It's just a picture of the law of demand. Okay, but let's be real. It's not just about the price, is it? I mean, that's a huge part of it for sure. But this is where it gets really interesting, because there are all these other forces at play that can change our buying habits, even when the price of the thing itself stays exactly the same. Let's talk about your income, for instance. For most stuff, what economists call normal goods, if you get a pay raise, you'll probably buy more of it. Simple enough. But then you have these other things called inferior goods, where the exact opposite happens. Think about it. When your income goes up, you might stop buying cheap instant noodles and start buying fresh pasta instead. Your demand for the noodles actually goes down as you get richer. And it's not just income. There's a whole list of other factors, like the price of related goods. If Coke gets super expensive, demand for Pepsi might go up. Those are substitutes. Or think about your own tastes. One day kale is the superfood everyone wants, the next day it's something else. These are all those outside forces that are constantly messing with our buying decisions. So, you know how we just said price goes up, demand goes down? Well, for almost every rule, there's an exception, and the law of demand has a really famous kind of weird one. Back in the 19th century, an economist named Sir Robert Giffen noticed something that seemed impossible. When the price of bread went up, the poorest workers in Britain actually started buying more of it. How on earth does that make any sense?
Well, this is what's known as a Giffen good, and it's a wild paradox. Here's how it worked. For these workers, bread was a huge part of their budget. So when its price went up, it basically destroyed their purchasing power. They suddenly couldn't afford anything else, like the small amount of meat they might have bought. So, to just get enough calories to live, they had to stop buying meat entirely and pour all their remaining money into the only thing they could still kind of afford, which was more bread, even at its new higher price.
Okay, so knowing all that, we can now get to probably the most important concept in this whole explainer. It's the difference between a movement along the curve and a shift of the curve. Let's tackle movement first. This is simple. A movement happens only when the price of the product itself changes. We're just moving from one point to another on the very same demand curve. You can just think of it as a reaction. The price goes down, you slide down the curve and demand more. That's called an expansion. The price goes up, you slide up the curve and demand less. That's a contraction. The key thing is the overall desire or conditions haven't changed. You're just reacting to a new price on the tag. A shift, on the other hand, is a totally different beast.
A shift happens when one of those other things we talked about changes, like you get a raise or a new fad starts. Suddenly, the entire price-to-quantity relationship is different. The old curve doesn't apply anymore. The whole thing has to pick up and move.
So, let's say you get that pay raise. Now you're willing to buy more coffee at every possible price. The entire curve moves to the right. That's an increase in demand. On the flip side, what if a big study comes out saying coffee is terrible for you? Well, now people want less coffee at every price. The whole curve shifts to the left. That's a decrease in demand. It's a total change in the game.
So let's nail this down, because it's the key takeaway. A movement is a change in the quantity people demand because the price changed. A shift is a change in demand itself because some outside condition changed. Think of it like this. A movement is walking along a path. A shift is when someone picks up the whole path and moves it somewhere else.
And there you have it, the desire, the ability to pay, and the willingness to spend. That's the engine of demand. You now get the forces that are pulling on one side of the economic rope. But that's only half the story, right? For every person wanting to buy, there's got to be someone willing to sell. So what's driving them? Well, that is a question for another day.